Somebody said to me, if there's no strong evidence that masks work, and that's true, there is no randomized controlled trial to say masks work, but we definitely know there's a cost to using them. Why would you do it? Shouldn't you know they're good before you take the harm of wearing them? And I would say you might want to, that would be a good point. It would be a good point under the condition that you don't have vaccines coming and that you don't have basically all medical and scientific organizations telling you to wear masks. All right, I promised you that I was going to give you what conservatives don't understand about masks. You ready for this? This will be draft 1, all right? So the first draft of this is just to give feedback. So if I say something that doesn't pass the fact check, you'll get back to me, and then if I get the energy, I'll write this up so it's maybe one better document. Starting with this, here's what conservatives tend to not know about masks. Number 1, there has never been a randomized controlled study of mask effectiveness for coronavirus. It hasn't happened. So, when you send me a link of all the studies that show that masks don't work, you haven't sent me anything, because that doesn't exist. There has never been a randomized controlled trial of mask effectiveness for coronavirus. If you think that's ever happened, you're misinformed. There has never been one. So what can you conclude if there's never been the gold standard kind of trial where you've got a randomized controlled trial and you're comparing it to something? Now, the first thing you need to know is that there can't be a trial like that because it would be unethical. You wouldn't send people into a virus situation without masks if the entire medical community, most of them, think that masks can save lives. So there's no way to test it. So what are all these studies that people keep sending me saying that masks don't work? Well, they are studies of other studies, which are none of them being the randomized control type. So it might be a, let's say, after-the-fact study that says this group wore masks, this group wore masks, let's say, later or differently or didn't, and then you just see how they did. What would you know for sure if you compared two groups and one had a good result and one didn't? If it's not a randomized controlled trial. If it's not that, what have you learned by comparing these two situations? And the answer is nothing. If you think that those other kinds of trials are telling you something useful, then you don't understand how any of this works. There are also, try this experiment. Go to Google and do a search on this. Masks work for coronavirus. And just see how many studies will tell you that masks do work. Then do the same study, same search, except masks do not work for coronavirus. And you know what you'll find? A whole bunch of studies, none of them randomized controlled studies, that say masks don't work. So now you've got a list of studies that did not study coronavirus specifically, did not, because it wasn't a randomized controlled study that studied coronavirus and masks. Usually it's something else. They'll study something in the laboratory, or they'll look at a different kind of study, or some other example from the past, etc. If you were to add up all of the ones that say masks maybe don't work, but they're not the good kind of studies, and all the ones that say masks probably do work, but they're also not the good kind of study, how do you weigh those? A whole bunch of trials, a whole bunch of studies that say they do work, a whole bunch of ones that say they don't work. So that's all you know. How do you weigh it? Now, I'm not going to tell you that masks work or don't work. If you think you're going to get that out of this presentation, you're not. I'm going to tell you how to think about it. The actual answer of whether masks in the end are better or make things worse, I don't know. And I would suggest that if you think you know that, that's stupid, right? You don't know that. You don't know for sure that masks work. You don't know, and you can't know for sure that they don't work. It is completely unknowable. So if one of your opinions is they definitely work or they definitely don't work, those opinions are both stupid. A smart opinion would be something about probability, all right? So you can tell right away whether you're stupid or smart by whether you're talking about absolutes, definitely don't work, or definitely do work. Those are the stupid opinions, okay? Everything in between is smart. Even if you said 95% chance they work or 95% chance they don't work, you're in the smart zone because you're talking about probability. And that's all we can do because we don't have what? Randomized controlled trial. Don't have it. If we did, and we had maybe more than one of them, so it could be repeatable, well, then we'd have something pretty good. But we don't. So all we have are studies that say probably they work, studies that say looks like probably they don't, and none of those studies have any value at all. In fact, what would be the value of a study that got peer-reviewed and accepted for publication if you're going to put some odds on it being true? You don't even know what the study's about. I just tell you there was a study, it was peer-reviewed, it was accepted for publication in a major scientific publication. What odds would you put on it that the result in that study is actually true? The answer is coin flip. That's it, coin flip. No better than a coin flip. The fact that it was peer-reviewed, published, and you read it online is a coin flip. You should put no more odds on it being true than a coin flip, all right? So those of you who are saying, look at all these studies that show masks don't work, what you don't understand is that all of those studies put together and even analyzed by really smart people, no better than a coin flip. Likewise, the ones that say that they do work, no better than a coin flip. So that's what we're working with the quality of information. All right, let me go on. So what about herd immunity? Here's one that conservatives think. Conservatives say that masks don't work because the areas that have the strictest mask mandates and lockdowns, people throw those together like it's the same issue. I separate lockdowns from masks. I think there's less evidence for lockdowns being a good idea than there is for masks. So for me, those are just separate questions. I'm pro-mask. I'll tell you why when we're done. I'm anti-lockdown, except for some businesses that make sense. Maybe gyms can't open yet, for example. But I'm pro-opening up and pro-opening the schools, in case you want to know where I'm at on this. All right, so do mandates of masks work? Because we see that where the mask mandates are the strongest, you also have the worst infections. So a lot of conservatives have said to me, obviously the masks don't work because wherever there are the worst infections, there are also the most mask mandates. It's obvious. And look at the curve. Here's where the mask mandate came in. You see the curve still went up. Duh. If mask mandates happened on this date and the infections just got worse, proof that masks don't work. That's what conservatives tell me. But it doesn't work that way. You've got causation backwards. The reason there's a tough mask mandate is because they know the infections are going to be impossible to control, even with masks. It's the best you can do, but nobody says the masks stop the virus. Nobody says that's, we got our masks on, we're all good now. It's just to slow it down. So what you don't know is what that curve would have looked like without masks. There's no comparison. You know that they did masks, and you know that the infections increased. But what would the infections have been without masks? It's unknowable because that was never tested. So the fact that infections keep going up when mask mandates are in place means nothing about the effectiveness of masks? Nothing. You should take nothing from that, except one thing. You can conclude that masks do not stop the virus, right? Can we agree that we can conclude that a tough mask mandate will not just stop the virus? Because the curves are pretty clear on that. But we don't know if they would have been worse. We don't know, all right? So you have to make your decision without knowing that. I've heard also recently that what about herd immunity? Shouldn't we let the kids get it because they won't be that likely, they won't be that hurt by it, and then you get herd immunity, you keep the old people home, bada bing. Wouldn't that be good enough? Kids get herd immunity, eventually hide the old folks, build up enough herd immunity, you're good to go. Well, here's the problem with that. Kids bring the infection back to the family, and then the old people get it, and they die. That's a problem. So if you don't want that problem, where the kids get it, bring it into the family, and then old people die, then I hear conservatives say, but Scott, personal responsibility. Let the people who don't have a risk live their lives, or the ones who want to take the risk, and let the people who need to socially isolate just do it better. Just do it better. Socially isolate better and you won't have a problem. Except that's not the real world. Have you seen real people act in the real world? People don't socially isolate at home. I'm sorry, they don't. And when the kid comes home, they're going to interact with the parents every time. No parent is socially isolating from their own freaking kid. That's not happening. Now the parent has it, because of course they're not socially isolating from their own children. What if the grandparents live in the house? Then mom and dad talk to the grandparents, blah, 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 dad dies. Now, if you think that personal responsibility is sort of the beginning and end of the conversation, I would say that's certainly a philosophy that I could get behind as a consistent philosophy. But you have to know it is a decision to kill lots and lots of old people, because that's what would happen. There's nothing you can do to protect the old people if the kids are running around getting infected. Nothing. You could say it's their responsibility, but they're not going to act that much differently. You just have to accept that from a legal perspective, saying who's responsible makes a lot of sense. You have to have a system where somebody is responsible. But when you're talking about a disease, responsibility is irrelevant if nobody's going to act any differently, and they're not. Imagining that letting the kids get herd immunity would not kill millions of seniors is not realistic. It would. It would kill millions of seniors if you got to herd immunity. So it's better to prevent herd immunity and hope that the vaccines can make up the difference as opposed to infections giving you the herd immunity. So herd immunity by vaccinations could be really good. Herd immunity by people just getting it could be very bad, and here's why. Not only because of the old people dying, because you can't socially isolate that well, but also because of the long haul problem. So a lot of people are not familiar, a lot of conservatives, for some reason, have not heard that there's a big concern about some kind of permanent or long damage from getting the coronavirus. Now, it doesn't happen to most people, apparently, but there are enough stories of it, even some famous people who are having very long-term problems. Maybe some of them will lose their smell permanently. We don't know that yet. But how much weight should you put on the long-haul problem? Let's look at the randomized controlled study of the long-haul problem. Oh, it doesn't exist. So if we don't have a randomized controlled trial to know what this long-haul problem is, what can you do about it? You just have to use your judgment. You're going to have to say, we think this is a risk, but we don't know how big it is. And that's like the real world. You have to make judgments without really knowing the risk of each one. Personally, I think that's a big enough risk that I would be pretty extreme about avoiding that. Because I don't know if it's a problem, but if it is a problem, it's a problem for the rest of your whole life. So it's not a risk that I would take. So if you said, Scott, do you want to just get the coronavirus and get it over with, like Rand Paul, I would say, I don't know if I'm going to be the one who recovers well. So no, I would rather not get it. And if you think that getting it is the right play, well, you could get lucky and just get your antibodies and no symptoms. But it's not a risk I'm willing to take. The long haul risk, it's a pretty big risk, at least in terms of if it's real, it would be the rest of your life. That's a big risk. People lose limbs to sugar abuse. Well, of course, it depends on the size of the problem, right? So if the long haul problem is 10 people in the United States ever, then I'm not going to worry about it. If it's millions, if it's hundreds of thousands of people, which it well could be, we just don't know, well, then I'm pretty worried about it. I'm not feeling the same as if about people eating sugar, as was said in the comments. All right. So you don't want herd immunity to happen naturally. Some people still say that Sweden is a success story, but you should update your information on Sweden. Apparently, Sweden has decided that their technique of being a little bit loose about this was probably the wrong technique. And I believe that Sweden is moving closer to the European model, having believed that they did not use the right model. That's where I think it is right now. But don't use the Sweden example in your arguments, because that's changed. All right, how about, here's some other things that I notice conservatives don't know. They've seen studies that say that the holes in the mask, any kind of mask, are bigger than the size of a virus. So the hole, if you were to go microscopic and look at the mask, there'd be, let's say, holes this big, depending on your magnification. And then the virus would be like a little dot going through this big hole. So then some conservatives say, well, a mask is useless because this virus will fly right through that gigantic hole. Here's what people who make that argument miss. Viruses don't travel by themselves. They travel attached to water particles. Try this experiment at home. Go up to your mirror and put on your mask, and then blow on the mirror. See how much of a water vapor film is there. Then take the mask off and do the same thing. Just go on your window or mirror and see if there's a difference in the water vapor. If there is, that means that the mask is stopping some amount of water vapor. We're not trying to stop it all. I'll get into that. You're trying to reduce the amount that's floating around. Now, if you put your mask on and you went into a phone booth with one person, let's say one of you is infected, and you stayed in the phone booth for a couple of days, would the mask help you avoid infection? No. No, because you went into a phone booth and whatever air got past the holes in the mask would stay in there and you'd be marinating in it until you got it. So under that situation, would a mask work? No. A mask would be completely useless if you were trapped in a phone booth for 2 days with somebody infected. But that's not the real world. Most of the real world is small interactions. Could having a mask that we know stops some amount of water vapor, which we know is what is carrying some amount of the virus, could that make a difference for small interactions? Well, here's the other thing that conservatives seem not to know, which is that the viral load makes a big difference. So in other words, if one particle of a virus got on you, you'd probably either not get it, or it would start slowly, because it's starting from such a small number of virus, that your body would have a little more time to organize its defenses, and that although you might get symptoms, they might be more mild because you're low viral load. So in other words, the person who's marinating in the phone booth with an infected person for 2 days is going to get a lot of virus. That person is more likely, say the scientists, say the doctors, to get a worse outcome. Now, is there a randomized controlled trial on viral load to show us for sure that getting more of it is going to make you sicker than getting a little of it? No. No, there is not a randomized controlled trial of coronavirus showing you that a greater viral load will give you a worse outcome. But it would be consistent with what medical professionals know about viral loads. So it could be that coronavirus is the exception to the rule. But that's not a smart play. In other words, if you're doing risk management, again, you don't know, you've got all these unknowns, you would assume let's say the smartest way to approach it is that this virus is similar enough to other viruses that the amount of viral load probably makes a big difference. Not every time, maybe you can't prove it for sure, but it's the smart play, all right? So, if the amount of virus you're infected with makes a big difference, we don't know it, but it's a smart play that it would be, right? Assuming it's true would be the smart way to think of it, even if it turns out it's not true later. So therefore, masks stop some amount of moisture. That means they're stopping some amount of the virus. And if viral load matters, there's your argument for why masks probably work, even if you can't measure them. What about the problem of, here's some other points. Somebody said to me, if there's no strong evidence that masks work, and that's true, there is no randomized controlled trial to say masks work. And since that we don't have that, and since we do know that masks could cause problems, might reduce your oxygen, fog your glasses while you're driving, give you panic attacks, you could think of 100 ways that masks are definitely bad. So here's the argument. If we don't know they're good, but we definitely know there's a cost to using them, why would you do it? You know, shouldn't you know they're good before you take the harm of wearing them? And I would say you might want to, that would be a good point. It would be a good point under the condition that you don't have vaccines coming and that you don't have basically all medical and scientific organizations telling you to wear masks. Now, the fact that every modern country is recommending its citizens wear masks if the virus is present, and every medical organization is saying the same thing, and probably 99% of doctors and experts are saying the same thing. Does that mean they're all right? It doesn't. No. Because, again, we're doing risk management. We don't know what's true. It is still completely possible that masks make things worse. It is still completely possible that masks really, really make a big difference. We don't know. And if you think you know, you're in the dumb world. You don't know. So you have to make your decisions based on these factors. So when do you trust the doctors and when do you be skeptical? Because you've seen me be skeptical of experts a lot of times, right? So what am I looking at to decide when to be skeptical and when to say, yeah, I'm going to go with the experts on this one? Well, one of my rules is how much complexity is involved. When you're looking at, say, an 80-year prediction of climate change, that's first of all more economic than medical. It's too complicated to do. That's just not something I would trust an expert with. A 20-year, 80-year projection of anything. I wouldn't trust any expert with that. But when you have a really limited question, which is, do you think these masks probably help with the coronavirus? And you have massive agreement among all the people who would understand this field the best, and it's a pretty simple question. Now, there's a little bit of complexity to it, but well within, the expert range, right? So under the condition that it's a simple question, and you have every country, every major medical organization, all the people who are the smartest about this, 99% of them are on the same side, I take that pretty seriously, right? If it were 50-50, I'd feel differently. If it were 90-10, I'd feel differently. But it's more like 99-1, I think, at least observationally. When you see somebody disagreeing, it's a doctor with weird hair, usually. Am I wrong? If you see somebody who's like the rebel doctor, who's got his own little video on YouTube, and he's the rebel, and he's saying that the medical community is all wrong, look at his hair. Hi, I'm the medical community, and my hair looks like I've never had a mirror in my entire life. Right? I'm just saying that when you see the doctor with the weird hair, and he's the rogue, like he's the only one who thinks the masks don't work, I'm not going to go with the weird hair guy every time. All right? I love my skeptics, and I'm completely biased toward wanting to believe the skeptic, because I think half the time, at least, the skeptic is right. But somebody says, I don't buy the long hair argument. Well, don't take the long hair argument to be too serious. But the majority of medical professionals are on the same side of this. All right, here's some other objections I hear from conservatives. That touching your mask, which people do, is going to reduce the whole point of a mask. Because I don't know about you, but my hand is all over my face mask when I'm using it. So does that make it worse? Well, I think not. Because when this first started, we thought that surfaces are where you get your coronavirus, like touching a surface. But we have learned more recently that the surfaces are not nearly the problem that we thought. It's pretty much an airborne problem. It doesn't seem to be surfaces related. It's still smart to sanitize everything and wash your hands, because there's got to be some effect from surfaces. But I think the thinking is that there's not enough of an effect that touching your mask is going to increase the risk more than having a mask decreases it. Now, could I be wrong? Sure, right? It's risk management. It's not certainty. So could I be wrong that touching your mask makes it worse? Maybe. Maybe it does. But I would say that my judgment on this is that since touching surfaces seems to be not a big issue, I mean, your grocery store lets you touch everything. They don't love it, but, are a lot of people getting coronavirus from grocery stores? Because the grocery store is nothing but people touching common items all day long. It doesn't seem to be a problem. So, there's that on touching. All right. Conservatives also say that, all right, so getting back to the point of should you do something where the mask benefit is not proven by a good trial, but there are lots of doctors who say, yeah, our judgment is it's probably going to help because water particles are bigger than the mask holes, etc. All right. What about opening businesses? I'm in favor of opening businesses and then just tracking them. Because I think the only way that we can get opened, given that this coronavirus is going to linger for God knows how long, I think you just have to open businesses, and then when people get infected, ask them where they've been. And as soon as you see a correlation, let's say, we don't think restaurants are going to be the big problem, but let's say they were. Well, then you close them up. So I think you just have to experiment with it. So I'm pro opening businesses, just in case you wondered. All right. And kids in school, I think that the harm to kids of keeping them out of school probably exceeds the benefit. So I'm very pro putting kids back in school with all the safety that we can bring them. But you should be aware that does mean grandma is more likely to die. There's just nothing you can do about it. You can try to socially distance all you want, but people are going to die if kids go back to school. I just think that's the trade-off that's worth it. I think killing, I'm going to say it directly, I think that getting kids back in school is more important than saving, I don't know, 100,000 old people's lives. You know, if you can't say that out loud, you probably shouldn't be involved in decision making. But I'm going to say it out loud. Getting kids back to school would be worth 100,000 senior citizens dying. You know, if you can't say that out loud, you just don't belong in the conversation. You should be able to say it. Do I like that? No. I'm one of the people who might be dead. Right? I'm sort of rapidly approaching the high-risk category of life. I don't like the fact that I might be dead, or that somebody I love might be dead. But yeah, I'm still going to say we should get the kids back to school. The other things that people say is that the masks are really some kind of a control thing, and that really it's the global conspiracy to make us all agree to anything. So the masks are really just a way to manipulate us into higher control later. I would call that just crazy. There's some things that you don't need an argument against. You know, if somebody says a UFO landed in their backyard, I'm not going to go check, right? If somebody says Bigfoot ate the cupcakes that were on the counter in your kitchen, I'm not going to check the video. I don't think Bigfoot ate the cupcakes. There are some things you don't need to research. And I don't need to research that the masks are some kind of a global control conspiracy thing. That's just crazy. All right? So, somebody here says, masks don't work. So whoever it is who says here, masks don't work, did you hear anything I said? Was there anything I said that you listened to, or did you just sign on? Masks don't work. So just in summary, for those of you who signed in later, I can't know, nor can you, if masks work or they don't work. It's not knowable. We don't have a randomized controlled trial. We're not going to have one because you can't ethically do it. You're going to have to use the information you have, and it's all unreliable. So how do you make a decision with all unreliable information? Well, all you can do is figure out which of the unreliable information is the worst. All those studies that are not randomized controlled trials, worthless. Ignore them all. Size of the hole of the mask compared to the size of the virus, worthless. That won't tell you anything. The real world would tell you something, but those two different sizes don't tell you anything because of the water vapor, blah, blah, blah. And then somebody had the argument that the mask would rip off the water vapor and aerosol the virus, and it would actually be making the virus more transmissible because the mask would carry it, would make it go from larger particles to smaller particles, to which I say, I suppose anything's possible. Maybe. I wouldn't rule it out, but I don't think we have evidence of it. So I would throw that in the mix and say, I can't judge that one. I don't know. But there's certainly a risk both ways. Somebody says, we found out that COVID is on vapor, not droplets. Well, vapor is still, it's got to be on droplets as well. How can it not be on droplets? That doesn't make sense. Are you for tagging people, Scott? You mean tagging the people who have been vaccinated? I think we may have no choice at one point. I think we'll probably have no choice. But it's not ideal. You know, I think that we've reached the point where our loss of privacy is largely just guaranteed. So to me, I tend not to argue the privacy stuff too much, because it would be like arguing against rain. It's going to rain. You could argue against it, but it's still going to rain. Privacy is like that. You're going to lose all your privacy. I don't see, there's just no way around that in the long run. In the short run, you could, claw it back a little bit, but in the long run, there will be no privacy. Let's see, somebody had COVID and donated plasma, yeah. How about tattoos? What about tattoos? Oh, tattoos to show that you've been vaccinated. Somebody says the American Academy of Pediatrics study shows 0 child to adult transmission. Was that a randomized controlled trial? No, it wasn't. So what kind of credibility do you put on that non-randomized, non-controlled trial? Coin flip. It's a coin flip. You shouldn't put any credibility on it. It's just a coin flip. Now, this study like that could tell you there's something to look into. It could tell you that you do want to do a randomized control trial. But if you don't have one, you really don't know anything. All right. And there's a reason that we require the randomized controlled trials. It's because without them, you're so often wrong. We will know who has been vaccinated once the side effects start happening. Well, no report of bad side effects yet, except people getting sore and tired for a few days. I'm just looking at your comments today. There's no randomized control for Bigfoot. Yeah, there's some things that are just too obvious. You don't need a randomized control study. Why do I think the Time article came out? Well, it could be that the Time article was to tell us something that we would have found out a different way. So it could have been inoculation, so that they could spin it the way they wanted to spin it, and then the next time you hear it, you already have this framework built, and you go, oh, they already told us about that. Somebody says, some of these periscopes are good, and others are like this one. Well, the thing that you don't know is that it's when I disagree with you that is where you find value. Agreeing with you doesn't help you that much. Feels good. Feels good. But I think you like it better when I disagree. All right. Super Bowl. Is there a Super Bowl this weekend? Not paying attention. Randomized control study, people don't know what it means. Well, it just means that it's a high quality study that you could largely trust. All right, give me a feedback. How many things did I tell you that you had not heard before? So just in the comments, tell me what I said about masks today that you had not heard before. Now forget about whether it's true, because remember, we don't have certainty about any of this. Let's see. Looking at so some are saying none. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Well, you're a smart group. So most of you saying that none of it is new. Well, I guess what I don't know is how many heard nothing new and didn't change their minds. Oh, okay, interesting. So almost universally, people are saying that there was nothing new there. Now, there may be nothing new in terms of the facts, but the way to think about it, I think, is not common to the way I'm seeing people thinking about it. All right, so give me some feedback on what points I may have gotten wrong on my mask stuff. You can send it to me one way or another, and I will revise, and then we'll see where we go from there. Bye for now.